So I'm very happy that you agreed to meet me.
Yes, of course.
Yes, so my name is Assistant Ralph Kaiser. I'm working. Should you want to take it first? No?
No, I'm going to press that.
Yeah, it's probably better. Yeah.
Yes, you are of German extraction.
I can't hide it. But other things have to be hidden. We come to it. Pardon me?
You don't come in a Middle Eastern dress.
All right.
Okay,
So
here, Mr. Kaiser.
thanks for calling me.
No problem.
Thank you. So I'm working in West Africa.
West Africa.
West Africa.
Ghana, Senegal, stuff like that.
Exactly.
Cote d'Ivoire.
Exactly. Those countries. And I'm an advisor to a minister of mines in one of those countries. Now, I don't know whether you know how those politics work.
Well, we represented a minister.
Right.
He fell out of favor. They kicked him out, bulldozed his house down to the ground, and had to move to the United States.
Really?
He didn't agree, so he tells me, to share in the bribe to deliver rare earth minerals or something like this.
Right. My case is a bit different on the other side of the spectrum, because there are lots of, not so much rare earths, but lots of minerals
Yes.
and natural resources. And the countries can only make some money through renting out concessions. So, but there's a lot of competition for those concessions. So companies are eager to get hold of rare earths or other minerals.
Yes.
And so they pay some special money for it. I wouldn't name it bribe, I would say facilitation money.
Yes, in the United States they have the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which distinguishes between normal and customary payments,
Right.
and then extraordinary payments, which are not considered proper. So basically, I think the way that work breaks down from the United States point of view is, if I'm going through customs in Ghana,
Right.
and they want a little gift to let me through, that's okay. But if I'm Boeing Aircraft and I'm going to pay $100,000 million, that's not okay.
Good, but that is affecting U.S.-American
It's exclusive.
nationals.
I just mentioned there's a
Right.
distinction. Like there's honest graft, it's customary. We know that the bureaucrats can't live on what they're getting paid.
Right.
But when you're really buying the business and it's not just a normal payment, then it becomes a bit of an issue. But I understand in your case, it is considered, so far as we understand, an expediting fee that is common and customary.
That's correct. Now, he made some money in the past. He's getting older. He wants to spend the money in some nicer environment than in his own country. And he thinks money is better being managed in the United States than in his country. So he wants to bring the money into the States. His wife eagerly wants a brownstone. But he wants to be flexible. So he wants to buy a Gulfstream jet or another jet. Any plane, but which is representative. He wants to commission the building of a yacht. So he needs some money here. Now the question to
Let me
you.
just ask you a question. If he spends that kind of money that fast, is he going to attract attention from people who are going to claim that he did something improper?
Not in his country, no,
Okay.
no. And it was over years, so it's not just 1 year and a big payoff.
Maybe we'll need to use different corporations to own these things to hide the direct ownership.
So how to go about it? Therefore, I'm here now.
Yeah, we can figure that out. That's not.
Could you just give me an idea how to do it? So he wants to bring the money in here.
Where is the money now?
The money is in the country still.
And is he authorized to send that kind of money outside of the country?
He is. He can do so.
So we can get it into the banking system.
Mm-hmm.
Banks that have correspondent relationships with banks in the United States,
for instance?
We may have to, it seems to me, send this money, not so sure Switzerland is the right place anymore because there's so much focus, but Luxembourg or some intermediary European location, which is a little less stringent than the United States at the moment. So it's coming to the United States from a bank that's known in the United States.
Right.
We have had trouble recently. I represented and still do a man from the Citibank threw him out. Why? Well, we're not telling you why, but I know why. Because they have a compliance department and they just don't need that trouble. So he went to. They took his account.
Accepted him.
Just a different level of scrutiny on a given day.
Right.
But there is that level of scrutiny. Some to the United States, not so good. Luxembourg to the United States, better. The UK to the United States, better. So that would be step one.
Right.
To move the money. Then it's a substantial amount of money. You can't disperse it all in an instant. Too much to let sit idle, so you want a money manager.
Right.
Do you do that yourself?
I asked your advice. I'm advisor to the minister in different matters. I'm not a financial expert.
Okay. So we have a number of, for that. I act, among other things, as a protector of trusts in Bermuda and the trustee of various family trusts. So we deal with a lot of trustees and money managers. And I would suggest 3 or 4 to you. Some are bigger, some are smaller. The smaller ones are often more flexible and understanding and less concerned about their reputation because they fly to a greater extent below the radar screen. So in the end, I might recommend, if they're not objectionable to you, some of the smaller people who are closer to what true private bankers used to be. But so we can get them set up with a money management account and then draw on that account for these investments.
Let me just be clear. So the smaller entities, you're talking about small banks or because you said money managers? What is their role and where is the money?
In the United States, we don't really have universal banks.
Right.
So say Deutsche Bank.
Yeah.
Deutsche Bank is a universal bank. They offer wealth management, private client, commercial banking, you name banking, investment banking, they do.
Right.
We have separation. Not 100%, but still so. So the people I was thinking of do not take deposits. They only take money in an account for an individual or an entity, a trust, whatever it may be, and they manage that money. They invest that money in the stock market. They buy bonds if that's appropriate. Occasionally they do alternative investments. What are those? Some small exposure to hedge funds.
Right.
In the United States portfolio, some small exposure to international investments that are not achieved by buying an international corporation, but is something that is traded only on the Hang Seng, whatever it may be. But these are not banks that have brick and mortar where you can walk in and make a deposit.
Okay, so it's more like a broker, but they are working as a bank.
Again, I think it's a semantic distinction. I'll try to find a way around it. Okay. Technically, the people I'm talking about are called registered investment advisors. And so they are not banks in the normal sense. Or money managers is also a term that's used. So they don't take your money and then lend it out to people to buy houses or finance their businesses and so forth. And 2008, we had this financial meltdown. None of these registered investment advisors had any exposure, any risk that the money that their clients gave them was itself going to disappear.
Right.
Now, the money that they gave them and was then invested in the stock market was, of course, subject to the downdraft in the market. But it didn't go to zero. It's not like Lehman Brothers.
Right.
It didn't disappear. So this is as safe as invested money can get. And there are different kinds of asset managers. Some are more aggressive, some are more conservative. Your client may decide, well, I certainly don't want to lose my capital, but I'd also like to make money, so X% of my portfolio, I would be interested in some growth opportunities.
Okay. That sounds interesting, but my client, or I should say, my client, he wants to use the money, not invest. Might be somebody will invest. As I said, he wants to buy property, starting with a brownstone.
Well, is it going to reduce his capital to zero when he does that?
It's over years, no, but so some money will stay. But he needs the money to purchase things. Some money might stay, he could invest.
No problem.
The question is how we can use, if those investment managers, they are having interest in investing it. How can he use it? How is he in control of the money? It's important.
Absolutely.
He has to be in control of the money without his name appearing.
Well, then he'll need a trust.
Can it be a company? Easier than a trust. So we have two issues. One is how he can hide his name behind the money, and how he can bring the money into the States and use the money and control it.
Just to clarify one thing, even if he gives the money to an investment manager,
right,
and we would explain with the manager, for example, we use, which is a very big money manager, one of my clients, and I just brought back from Italy $2 million, which I asked them to hold in cash, because I'm not sure I'm going to give them all the money. I may want to make some other investments. No problem.
So they can keep it. Okay.
Absolutely. And every year we have to pay taxes, $100, $200, $1,000, whatever it is. I call them, I give them enough notice so they can make an orderly disposition in the market, and they send us a check. So they don't act as if they own the money. They do what we want them to do. In fact, for another client, I have checks on the account.
Yeah.
And I call them as I'm going to write a check for $50,000. Okay, no problem. So the money doesn't disappear. Now, what do they charge for that? Depending on the amount, sounds like it might be a substantial amount. It's going to be less than 1%. Now, if the money's going to come in immediately and be dispersed in 30, 60, 90 days, there's no need to even pay that. I suppose you could send it to my escrow account if you want. Yeah. But those are refinements.
Okay, then there are two issues. The first issue is how to bring the money in here without his name appearing on the documents. And the second one is security that his name would never appear. If you tell me tax has to be paid, hasn't the owner of the money been to be disclosed to the tax authorities, to IRS?
Well, there's no taxable transaction yet here.
Yeah.
Right? Only in future, maybe. What citizenship will he retain? Of his own country, or will he?
At the moment, it's the own country.
Will he seek to become? In the United States, we have a program where we put 500,000 or more into some kind of company that can employ people in a disadvantaged area. You have a right to get a green card.
Right.
Some people like that idea, some people don't, because of the tax aspect. Once you're in a green card, you're obligated to disclose all of your income worldwide, and it's taxable in the United States. But some people feel, especially the Chinese, that having the ability to bring their families over here before the government decides to steal all their money is worth the risk. You know, I mean, it's the 25th anniversary of Tiananmen Square.
Right. But again, the point is his name can't be disclosed. So he might...
If I may, let's start with this. The money as it sits now, is it in his name?
It's different names.
Okay. So it will come as those different names?
Including his name, yes.
So we have to scrub it at the beginning, if we can, or scrub it at the intermediary location that I mentioned.
So how to do this? Intermediary, that means a bank in Liechtenstein or Luxembourg. Luxembourg.
We will set up an appropriate entity, whatever they actually call it. There's more than one kind in Luxembourg, which will receive this money, consolidate it, and then on behalf of that new entity, call it clientoverseas.com or whatever,
right.
And then that will send money into the United States, whether it's to my escrow because it's going in and out, or to a money manager because we're going to establish that relationship.
Right.
And the client will be the Anstalt, or whatever the technical term is for this Luxembourg entity.
Right.
This will involve maintaining such an entity.
Right.
Now, after I consider the facts more carefully, we may choose some other location for this sort of worldwide asset protection and privacy program.
Right.
But this we know how to do. The choices will be made known and consideration will be given.
Right.
So that can be done. As far as taxes, if he makes money in the United States, if he becomes a green card holder.
Or if you invest, you've been talking about investment.
Well, but if the investments produce taxable returns, one of the specialités of the money managers is to, at the end of the year, adjust the portfolio, the profits and the losses, so that there are no reportable gains.
And no taxes to be paid.
Right.
So that is possible.
Yes.
So
Not easy. It's a bit of secret sauce. We have people in Switzerland who can do this and so forth. As I said, Switzerland is under scrutiny at the moment. But your man is not an American yet, so it's not too late to see if these things are still available. So we have a moving target, both on your end and in the world at large. But I'll tell you something, it may be ridiculous, but I represent a gentleman who has been trying to purchase a bank.
Right.
And your client, should we proceed down that line, might say, okay, I'll tell you what, I give $2 million, buy the bank, then I become the bank's client, and I save X millions of dollars on taxes and so forth going forward. Makes sense to me. So he owns a bank.
He owns a bank.
And then he makes money on the bank, and the profits stay outside the United States, different names, so maybe more than you bargained for, but we are working on these things for other people similarly situated.
Okay, so that is not a big problem.
No.
Setting up.
I should never say it's not a big problem, because I sell legal services. It's going to take time. It's going to take some money. People need to be paid in one place or another, but we can get it done.
Now, the more people are being involved, the more people, or the higher the risk that his name could be disclosed. So how to make sure his name will never be disclosed?
Let me try to explain that. In the world of international asset protection, you have a variety of private bankers. Switzerland, for example, Pictet is a famous name. They financed Napoleon. Okay, that's how far back it goes.
Right.
You go to their offices, they have trinkets from Napoleon on display.
Interesting.
And there are other people in different places and they make their business by privacy and secrecy. I don't know how much we're talking about here.
We would start with 50 million.
Okay, 50 million with all due respect is not enough for them to lose their reputation.
So how much would
I
they?
can't think of an amount. It would have to be well above $1 billion. And even then, I have no reason to think they would, because these are generational things. Fathers set it up, and then his son is in it, and his son is looking forward to a career in this business because they think that blood is thicker than water. They bring their own people in. So they don't want to give up this franchise, this annuity going forward. So very private. The definition of a Swiss banker is he's walking down the street with you on one side, he sees a client on the other side, doesn't even say hello. Does not know him in public. It's like someone once asked a lawyer I know, I said, "Oh, you're working with a friend of mine." He said, "Yes, he's doing very well." I said, "What's the name of the case?" He said, "I can't tell you." He said, "Why not? It's a matter of public record." I said, "Yes, but you have to know where to look." So the people in the business know what they're selling, and I have never heard of anybody disturbed by a breach of privacy in that regard.
But now you're talking about billions of dollars, so about presidents and not ministers.
Trust me, they won't take the account unless they're going to give it their full level of protection.
Right.
Of this I can assure you.
Right. So
that's their business.
That is mainly Switzerland. Other countries?
Well, you have Switzerland. We use some people in St. Vincent's, Nevis in the Caribbean. I also deal with Bermuda Trust Company. There are different reasons to choose one versus the other because of the provenance of the money and the likely use of the money, where it might be invested, who it might be distributed to, so forth. Some people think Bermuda is just too close to the United States.
It might raise suspicion. Bermuda is known, or Caribbean islands, so it might be better a different jurisdiction. What's about Panama, for instance?
Yes, we used to use Panama, not so much anymore. But I have to tell you, we're talking here about, in Europe, you're familiar with a cascade of shareholders, so that the actual ownership is retained by a very small percentage, and yet below that there are lots of other levels of investors. Here we have typically a similar kind of thing. We have a money manager. That money manager has an account in Samoa, for example.
Mm-hmm.
The account in Samoa, after a year or two, is vested, so that to attack that money, you have to go to Samoa. You have to hire a lawyer in Samoa, which of course is very inconvenient. And so you have that protection. But the money really winds up back at the bank in New York. So we set up these whole constellations of interrelationships.
Mm-hmm. Constellation of interrelationships of different companies and banks, or both.
Money managers.
All money managers.
Yeah, I would avoid, since it rings a little bit the wrong bell, the word bank.
Yeah, money
so
manager.
I would say private bank.
Right.
Or money manager.
Right. So.
Or custodian. Maybe that's the other word that's useful. The guy in Samoa that I mentioned does nothing except sits on the money. Yes, come in. This is Mr. Kaiser.
Richard, how are you?
Yes. Sorry, no. The first thing is this is highly confidential. We don't know who we're talking to or why we're here. All right.
You only know that I'm here.
That's fine. And we were talking about
I've faced that before.
International asset protection and so forth, and I was just going to say you have background in banking, you worked as a trust officer, and so forth. Yes. So we have the potential of a significant amount of money coming out of West Africa and however it gets here, whether it goes through Europe, Luxembourg, Switzerland, or elsewhere, to be invested in the United States, perhaps in a brownstone, and then also perhaps to buy an airplane and other fun uses of big money. But privacy is very key. So I started with the idea that we have to scrub the money before it arrives here. And I suggested before we have any of the facts that we send it to Luxembourg and put it into an Anstalt or whatever the proper entity is, and it's the name of that entity that then deals with the correspondent in the United States. And we'll have to maintain that entity and so forth, but I think that's the first step. So feel free to ask some questions, give some answers.
This is coming from West Africa, Nigeria?
West Africa. I can't tell you now, but when we go into business, I can tell you. But West African country.
West Africa.
Yeah.
Has this been in funds in West Africa for a while, or was it transferred to someone else?
Yeah, accumulated over some years. So it's not accumulated over some years. Yeah. So 7 years, not several years. So it's not just one-off. So there is no suspicion of any wrongdoing. So I explained it's actually facilitation money, or you gave another expression.
Honest graft.
An honest graft. So okay, fine. So I have to be frank. It's honest graft, but it's not money being gained through drug dealing or arms dealing or human trafficking. So it's honest
Because that's what
money.
you got to prove eventually, I mean, if anyone raises any suspicions.
Yeah.
But that could be, if there's clean funds, it shouldn't really be a problem.
But the source shouldn't be known at all. So the money comes here. So
No, source. I'm not talking about the source. I'm talking about the use of the funds. That's what
right.
I'm talking about.
The use would be, as I said, he want to start with a brown house, buying a brown house in New York. And he wants to use a bit of his money for some improving his lifestyle. So he wants to buy a plane, commission a yacht, and probably some other stuff. He might be investing as well, but that is music of the future. At the moment, he wants to start with a brownstone and those two other items. So he needs to have the money here in the States.
Is he an African nationality?
Yeah, he's African. Yeah. African.
Oh, okay. Is the money in banks in Africa now?
Yes, at the moment.
Any regulatory problems with those banks?
No, not as far as I know. No.
Because I had a case once where there were clean funds, but there were some tax issues in the whole country
All right.
before the funds came over. So we had to clear that problem first.
He's a minister, and the ministers, they are all together. So
Yeah, but let me just pick up on this point. The fellow I mentioned who represented from
yeah.
the reason he came to us to represent him was because he had $1 million in some bank account.
Yeah.
And somebody brought a lawsuit against him, claiming it belonged somewhere else, and they froze the account.
Right.
Okay. So he goes to court and he wins to unfreeze the account. But when he goes to get the money, there's no money in the account.
Yeah. Good. But that's one of the reasons he wants to invest the money here, because it's safer here. African countries well, what I could see now. So government might change. Countries there would be a push, but government might change. And they are more and more under scrutiny as well from donor countries, from donor governments, so to improve transparency, to implement anti-graft measures.
Yes.
One of the reasons his name can't appear, because he gives speeches about proper policies, good governance. And you can imagine his reputation if he being found out of having accepted some of the honest grafts, even if it's honest. So therefore he wants to have the money here.
Okay, so maybe one way to think about it is we have to leave it to you, and if you need help in Africa, we may have to find somebody how to get that money out of Africa to, for the moment, we'll say Luxembourg.
Yeah.
And then from there, we can help indicate how to move the money and continue the privacy that's been achieved by the exodus from Africa.
Yeah. So how can we be sure that the bank in, let's say, Luxembourg, doesn't know that the money is coming from a minister? Because you said we set up a bank somewhere else to filter the money if you want to. and to filter the name out, or filter out the name, but the money goes into the Luxembourg bank.
Well, first we're going to set up an entity
Yeah?
in Luxembourg, perhaps.
Right.
And that entity is then going to go to a bank to open an account.
Right. And the entity is now the owner of the account and the receiver of the money.
Yeah.
So if we follow back the money from the States, we end up at the entity in Luxembourg.
Correct.
Who is running the entity?
Well, this is where we get into the level of trust required in these international asset protection and privacy programs, where we have people we know over many years, people who specialize in this business, and this is what they do. And their reputation is what you depend on.
Right.
That they have the ultimate discretionary authority, but that they don't exercise that authority except by listening to the little birdie that's whispering in their ear what to do.
Okay, so they are trustworthy.
Oh yes, you want to add to that?
Oh, no, there would be an agreement between, let's say, the trustee and the individual or the entity.
Right.
Just to say what can and cannot be done.
Right.
So there's a wall there, privacy, and a lot of this can be done, openly to see what can be done, cannot be done, so make sure there's no problems being crossed.
Right.
But there are entities that specialize in doing this asset protection. Just like Americans try to do asset protection overseas, like going to Cayman Islands, Liechtenstein or wherever, set up entities of professional corporations and just do this type of stuff. There are entities in Europe that have been doing this for many, many years. And it's a matter of trust, you're right. Expertise and trust.
Okay.
They're in the business of privacy.
And because you know all of them, you would be the intermediary. So we would employ you to set all the structures, set up all these structures. Now,
so we would not do anything without your approval.
No, for sure.
Tell you for instance, we may have option A, B, and C.
Right.
And explain pros and cons of A, B, and C. So it's up to you or whomever say, all right, well, I don't like A, C's out of the question, B sounds pretty good.
Good. Now, I come back to the security. You mentioned tax might have to be paid, but we have already a structure where we don't have to pay tax because we...
There's no tax on the movement of the money because there's no new
No, but
tax.
spending here. So if you spend the money, I buy something...
Spend, there's no tax. Earn, there's tax potential.
So if I have a property I don't rent out, I wouldn't earn money, so I don't have to pay tax. But now I need a building manager, so I have to employ somebody.
It's a little different than what you may be accustomed to in Europe. So far as I know, we still only have sales tax and income tax and death tax, right? But we don't have tax on the ownership of assets. Right?
Yeah, but if I employ somebody to manage the property, or I have a pilot for the plane, I employ somebody, he has income.
Those are costs.
But for them it's income. Okay.
For them it's income. You don't have to.
For them it's income. For me it's cost.
Cost, right. Expenses.
So I don't have to pay taxes on it because it's cost.
And if we can orchestrate things for you completely, we may make that a business expense.
So there is no risk that IRS...
Spending, they love it. They want you to spend money.
Therefore we come here.
That's right. That's what makes our economy.
The only trouble with the IRS is or any taxing agency, it's income that they can attach.
Right.
Say, look, you made money. If you buy a building and you don't have to pay taxes, say there's no tax issue, you don't have to file taxes here, you can run them as a loss. No one cares. It's up to you. But if you get income from that, then you may, depending on the entity, depending on the jurisdiction, depending on the situation, you may have to pay taxes.
So the company employing people to manage property, whatever, they would declare it as costs, as expenditures. So they don't have to fill any tax forms.
When we talk about real estate, there will be real estate taxes on the brownstone.
Right.
For instance, if you buy a building here, it's real estate. New York State will impose real estate taxes.
Right.
So those taxes have to be paid. But that's to New York State.
So there is no IRS wouldn't come in. Because New York State, and New York State is safe.
Yeah, you pay the taxes.
Good.
Anyone, a government entity, now unless you're tax exempt for some reason, a charity or
Can you think of any?
Then you may have to pay minimum tax or no tax at all.
Okay. Can you think of any risk that my client's name could be disposed or could be forced to be disposed?
If the money is clean,
disclosed.
as you indicated, then there should be no risk.
No risk at all.
No risk at all.
If it's clean funds and there's no problem, there should not be a problem.
Now with this American company, the owner would be another company, you told me.
Yes, I think the companies used to move the money into the United States probably should be separate from the management company, the building. There's a company which I would recommend to own the aircraft, hire the pilots, maybe even rent it out to third parties when your client is not using it to defray the expense. You will have a substantial corporate organization.
Right. So I set up a number of companies.
Yes.
For every single mass expenditures.
Pretty much. Just like if you see all these taxi cabs, and
right.
Each one is an individual entity, so that if one gets into a crash, the exposure is limited to the value of that and its limited insurance. Keep things in different silos.
Right.
Everything doesn't run upstairs and blow up the whole thing.
But if I have such an intricate system of different companies, who is managing all of them? Because the more many companies are there, the higher is the risk of leakage, of money disappearing. And my client want to be in control of things.
Yeah. Well, you're familiar in the UK of a shadow cabinet, the people who are not in power, so you have the same kind of thing. To the extent that your client is interested in these things, he may not have the authority or even the existence from the point of view of the outside world, but he can sit on his throne on the second floor of his brownstone, have his ministers come to report to him, explain what they're doing. Or if he prefers, we can help to some extent get things up and running. We know people who can provide this service. I don't know the extent to which you might like to provide this service to run and maintain this empire. We have accountants of various kinds who can pay attention to these things. So all of these services are available, depending on the extent to which they are preferred to be provided by outside vendors.
So no disclosure.
No. I mean, you always run the risk that some disgruntled employee, right? So you have to be reasonably nice to people.
Right.
And you have to accept that if you want to say goodbye, you have to give them a reasonable severance.
So reasonably nice to people for sure. I have to be reasonably nice to you.
Okay.
Because you otherwise might say, they didn't pay me enough. But do you need to know the name of my client at one stage of the process? Or would my name suffice?
Well, you have to know the name of your client, but it will be confidential. That's my initial.
Well, I'm trying to think why.
Well, maybe not. Maybe I'm trying to think about past things I've done.
Right. Since it's of such a grave concern, let me ask you this.
It is.
Let's say your client comes to the United States.
Right.
When he's here, will we ever meet him?
If it could be possible to not disclose his name at all, for sure you wouldn't meet him. Or you might meet him, but you don't know who he is. He's a nice friend of mine.
Will you be more actively involved when he comes here?
If it's necessary to hide his identity, yes.
Okay, so the normal answer for a lawyer would be, as I said, we have to know who our client is. But having said that, now the question comes, who is our client? And as I've been suggesting, we'll use Luxembourg as the stalking horse for this purpose, our client may be an Anstalt in Luxembourg.
Right.
Happens
So we
to
don't
have
have
been
to know.
introduced to us by you, and its beneficiaries are certain people.
And the Luxembourg bank, you have experience. They should probably find the source or ask who is the owner of the money being transferred into our account. Okay, this is a company, but the company, somebody must be behind the company. No, the company in Luxembourg is getting the money from Africa, but who is behind the money sending it from Africa? Wouldn't they ask?
As I mentioned before, we have a moving target. So if you would like us to pursue this, we will contact our friends and find out, in the present environment, which banks, whether Luxembourg, Switzerland, or elsewhere, are receptive to money from Africa. And we will find out. And like everything else, some do and some don't.
Receptive means
from time to time.
Sorry, receptive means without asking questions. Without asking questions.
Yes.
For instance, Switzerland used to be very safe. Now it's not so safe because of the treaties with the U.S.
Right.
And they're trying to open up. So it depends. And now certain banks. So there's no black or white answer.
Right. Therefore, it's a moving target. So yeah.
Not on any given day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, some country may have legislation changes. Who knows? Then what normally happens is when you set up an offshore matter, if the legislation is going to change, you have authority in the agreement to go somewhere else.
So where do we have GGG? Marshall Islands?
Marshall Islands.
We have Marshall Islands. We also have Gibraltar and some other remote places, which are not as commonly used, but for that very reason, maybe more flexible, ask fewer questions.
And so you would act as our intermediary, so
Yes.
in the background, or you would have an official status as legal advisor to the company, a US-American company we will set up in New York?
I see no reason, unless you do, why we wouldn't be official legal advisor. But it's as you wish.
No problems with it. The only problem could be that you might be asked, you might be subpoenaed for...
We have attorney-client privilege in the United States.
And what's about a judge who is saying, but I need to know? Can't he overrule the privilege?
No. The court can sometimes, if it gets, pardon my French, pissed off, that some guy shows up in a Bentley, comes into court wearing rings and things, and has got the trophy wife, goes up there and says, I'm destitute, I have no money. And the judge says, that is ridiculous. You are living on what looks like $1 million or $2 million a year. I am instructing you to instruct your trustee in the Cayman Islands to send money. And while we're waiting for the money, you go into jail. But he doesn't do that to the lawyer.
Okay.
So we always advise, don't be greedy. Don't overdo it. Show some reasonably visible means of support for the lifestyle you're leading. Or you're married to somebody who happens to be very well off and likes the pleasure of your company. But don't disregard that and thumb your nose at the legal system completely. But the lawyer doesn't have that problem. They don't send the lawyers to jail because we run the country.
Do you run the country?
Still do.
I love it.
Still do.
I should say some lawyers run the country.
So you are some of them, 2 of them.
Yeah, a small amount.
We're still
yes.
members of a privileged class in this country.
So what does it mean you run the country? It means you...
We make the laws, and when we do so, we make them in a way that is advantageous to the lawyer.
2 ways. We make the laws, and some people say we selectively enforce the laws. Right. See, the laws are passed, right? And then laws are passed all the time, in any country.
Right.
But you can pass a law, but that doesn't mean the law is going to be enforced.
Yeah.
It has to be enforced. You could pass a law saying no one can drive more than 50 miles an hour, right?
Yeah.
And everybody drives 75 miles an hour. There's a law saying 50 miles an hour, but no one's enforcing that law.
That is always a problem, no enforcement.
Another way to look at it is the old adage, a good lawyer knows the law, and a great lawyer knows the judge. Okay. Now, in point of fact, I went to law school with half the judges who sit on the New York State Supreme and the Federal District Court in New York. This happens that way over time.
Right.
People you have lunch with, people you're members of the Bar Association. Are they going to throw a case for you? No. But are they going to bend over backwards to be courteous to you? Yes, they are.
It's the old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Who do you know?
That's also why you go to a local jurisdiction, it pays to get a local lawyer, even if your brains are coming from New York or Chicago or Los Angeles.
Good. Therefore, it's good to select lawyers with already gray or white
For
hair.
instance, if your client, say, invests in New York,
Yeah.
but then he wants to invest in Chicago or California.
Yeah.
We have one of our colleagues is in California.
Yeah.
I know lawyers in Chicago.
Yeah.
Not that we couldn't do it, but we want to know what the laws are in Chicago.
Yeah.
You see, because it's always local jurisdiction, especially in real estate. You see, because that's what the real estate is.
So I know you feel you have a perhaps overwhelming problem, and it is not without difficulty, but the desired results have been achieved, I believe can continue to be achieved, and frankly I don't know that there's much alternative but to think it through and study it carefully and make a test movement of money, for example, a modest amount if time permits, not the whole ball of wax.
Right, so this means the first step is setting up an account in, for instance, Luxembourg or Marshall Islands or whatever.
Islands, Gibraltar.
And then setting up a company same time here in US.
Yes.
With a nominee here from the US citizen you can provide.
Yes.
And then sending the first test batch of money through the Luxembourg bank here. Good. So we talk about what amount? About?
What would the legal fee be for this?
No, first,
$1 million.
$1 million. So as a test.
Yeah.
Because I said probably we would start with around 50 million, probably. I could imagine.
I would say $1 million.
$1 million.
If anything goes wrong, it'll be painful, but it won't be life-threatening.
But exactly. And legal fees?
Legal fees will be substantial, I have to admit. Depending on how much of this we have to do, probably be between $50,000 to $100,000 to set this up, including the cost of all the intermediaries involved for this whole setup. Because they provide directors and so forth, if you're familiar with that sort of
Right.
thing.
Okay.
So take Bermuda, you set up those funds and
Yeah.
like $5,000 to do it, and then $3,000 for the directors every year.
And then the maintainer.
So what is the annual about for directors? Annual fees? Annual costs, we should say. For directors.
There's no statutory fee, but basically each company sets its own policy.
Yeah.
I don't know of any statutory fee. Now there is an annual maintenance fee, franchise fee like that.
You're talking about a United States entity, or just generally in this?
No, the United States entity. We set up an entity in the United States.
Oh, how much would the directors be?
Yeah.
United States, we don't typically charge anything like the Bermuda people and so forth, but now we're talking about a slightly different role. I'll have to check for you because it's only recently that the United States has become a player. Delaware, if you're familiar, with asset protection trusts, which we've talked about, but it would not exceed what we talked about in Bermuda, which is like $3,000 a year.
For maintenance of the
for directors,
of the entity for directors, yeah. 3,000.
And then there might be, what did you pay in Bermuda? $1,500 a year.
$1,500 a year for maintenance fee of the accounts.
Of the accounts.
Yeah.
That's not
about
so
less
much.
than $5,000.
That is minimum.
Yeah.
And for you, how much about? Just having an idea, because I have to discuss this now with the minister.
So I tried to give you a gross number, 50 to 100
a year. No, that was setting up.
No, that would be for the
setting up.
One
And then
time.
after that, maybe $25,000 a year
Okay,
would
that
be a
is-
reasonable estimate of the cost of maintaining things and acting in these
Right,
capacities and
right.
so forth. Now, buying real estate would be a separate cost. So let's talk about a brownstone. Upper East Side? Do you have any
I have
idea?
to check. Yeah, most likely.
Okay, so let's take Upper East Side. What are we talking about? $16 million
Yeah.
these days?
About, yeah.
Okay, so what's the real estate closing fee on a $16 million property?
Oh, you mean the total fees? Yeah, there's fees? 25, 30.
Okay.
That big, yeah, because it's a real house. You gotta do
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
investigations, you gotta do the radon, you gotta do the environmental.
Now, if you're talking individual units, that's less, you know, like.
No,
No, it's what we talked about.
It was the building, oh,
For
that's
sure.
25, 30, which is the range, which is the then, because you gotta make sure, if you're buying, you gotta make sure when you purchase, that there's no outstanding liens or judgments against the owner of the property,
That
or
would-
there are any environmental problems.
Yeah, that would be your,
Yeah, that's what we do.
the honest on you now.
What happens in the United States, when a purchaser wants to buy property, the
Yeah.
purchaser's attorney will go get a title report.
Right.
They do a judgment search of the seller.
Uh-huh.
They also do a tax lien search
So on the seller.
of the seller.
Right.
And they also do a environmental lien search. For instance, in New York, you may have environmental liens for some
Right.
reason.
Yeah.
Actually, on a brownstone, there'll be a lot of them.
Yeah.
This garbage failure and this
Yeah.
environmental, you didn't separate the cans from the glass.
But what
But
happens?
that is all the,
Yeah.
It's all garbage, but you have to fight
that is
through
all
it.
through the seller, so it's,
Yeah,
Because,
seller, that's because
but-
the seller has to give to the buyer free and clear, clean.
sure.
Part of our job, and that's why it costs it, is to make sure that
Everything is
clean.
proper. Yeah.
That you're not buying your client is not getting into any.
You buy an
problem.
asset
You buy an
without
asset
trailing liability.
without liability.
Yeah.
Just like if you bought a company, you want to buy a company that's
Sure.
free and clear. You don't want to buy any judgment. Well, unless for some reason you want to.
Unless that's the purchase price. I'll
Unless that's
take
the
over the
purchase price.
liability,
Yeah, I'll
but I'm
take over
paying you nothing.
liabilities.
Rick Alfred, that sounds very, very promising. One last question. You didn't mention it, but the KYC, because I checked a bit.
Know your
there's the
client.
Know your client
Oh.
rule. So you are not subject to the rule as lawyers.
Not yet, but there's increasing movement in that direction. But you're our client.
I'm the client,
You,
not
Or
the
the entity
Or the
in
entity.
Or the
Luxembourg.
entity.
So it's not a problem then.
No.
And our financial, what was the name of the term? Financial, not the banks, but the financial
Money manager.
The money managers. They have a legal obligation to check, right?
Well,
But again, it's
they will rely on us to a great extent, and when we're dealing with the Luxembourg entity, this will help them meet their obligation.
so you would provide, you would assist,
Oh yes, absolutely.
you would assist the financial
Money
Manager.
Yes,
to get the information requested by KYC, by Patrick.
absolutely.
So there is no risk either of disclosure, but that could be a problem.
No. Just to make clear, as opposed to the way lawyers do things in some other countries, we do everything, soup to nuts. So there's no limitation. We don't say, oh, we don't do windows, or we don't deal with the financial money manager, whatever. No,
Right.
we orchestrate and organize the entire thing.
Right.
We're happy to take that responsibility.
And reduces the circle of people who know
It
what's
reduces
going
the people
on.
who know.
Yeah.
It also reduces, it actually can reduce the cost and expense of any legal fees. Because if you had 5 different law firms doing
Right.
5 different things, they charge 5 different ways.
Right.
Someone like us, we would help you purchase the plane through an entity, purchase the brownstone, deal with any other lawyers within the United States if he wants to buy property in Illinois, California, or wherever. So we do the more.
So you would work as kind of brokers as well, not buying it directly, but you know a real estate agency, so
Right.
you would facilitate all
It's
this
almost
kind
like
of
a-
broking, like a broker.
Okay,
Okay.
we use slightly different words,
Yeah.
but for convenience, I'll say yes.
So what word would you use? I need to learn this
General
language.
counsel?
Yeah, that's probably.
General counsel. Are you familiar with the term?
General counsel.
General counsel?
Okay. Yeah.
You have an entity, a company.
Right.
With that company, generally the president, vice president, board of directors.
Yeah.
But there's someone named general counsel. He's the attorney for the company.
Right.
He or she handles the day-to-day affairs.
Exactly.
Whether it's buying some other business, taking care of problems for the management, dealing with the board of directors, dealing with outside people. Now, the general counsel does all that, soup to nuts. However, sometimes the general counsel, due to the circumstances and situation, may have to rely on outside counsel. For instance, a lot of the companies, are you familiar with the asbestos litigation?
You see?
Asbestos.
Yes.
The powder stuff?
Yeah, the asbestos.
You know,
Yeah.
plaintiff lawyers would sue companies
Right.
that dealt in asbestos, like, what's the famous one now? Had their own general lawyer, general counsel. But in defending these cases, not only did the general counsel get involved, but they had to hire outside counsel to represent them.
Right.
Yeah, but that's a perfect example because their in-house counsel was have been a part of the case. So who do you think he hired in the first instance? The law firms, again, everybody knows that, but my point, the reason I interrupt, is because our part of our value to you is we know people, we make these connections, we make these arrangements. That's part of the service we provide.
Yeah. This I wanted to know. That's good. Yeah.
Like if you had a special situation, we would take care of it. But if we needed to refer to outside, we'd let you know. But that's part of what we do.
Therefore, you are so many years in business, so have a big network of
Yes.
lawyers, specialists, you know.
I started practicing in 1971. How about you?
Right. Good. Then you know lots of people.
Yeah, we better hurry up before all our friends retire.
Exactly. And so I have to hurry up, I'm a minister, before you go into retirement.
Yeah, no, we can't afford to. Our 401ks are now 201ks since the crash of 2008. All our retirement plans.
What is 401 and 201?
It's a retirement plan in the United States.
Okay.
Now it's worth half of what it used to be.
Everywhere, yeah.
So you see a lot of older people still making it to the office.
Let me explain why I want to continue practicing law.
Right. Housework, right?
No. I got to work till I drop.
So you should give me the phone number of your wife so that I make sure that there are more tasks on,
Okay, that's good.
on the list. Good.
May I ask, how did you happen to find our name?
I didn't know anybody here, so I checked one of those websites. I think it was martindale.com. Yeah, and then I checked your website. Looked very promising. I thought, I think those are my guys, and I'm happy that I did so. And I'm happy that you accepted me.
Yes. Our pleasure. An interesting assignment.
Without knowing me, and so it was good. Yeah.
An interesting assignment.
Yeah.
Potentially profitable for all concerned, but interesting. Something that needs to be done in this modern world. Very.
Yeah.
So especially countries like Africa, a lot of day by day.
Yeah, therefore his interest, minister's interest coming
South
here,
Africa,
bringing the money here.
Nigeria,